William Blake said that if the doors of perception could be cleansed, then what appears would be what really is, which is infinite. Or I may not have quoted that quite correctly, but that is. And what he says is very true. And what we are after is something that is far superior to any of the delusions that we might cling to, and far more satisfying. You see, with the first truth that life is dissatisfactory and is filled with suffering, the subtitle being, but it doesn't have to be, what Buddha always replied when somebody asked, what he taught, he said, "I teach suffering and the end of suffering." So the opposite of suffering, that's what we want. And what the Buddha had to say about that: when lust, hate, and delusion are abandoned, a man does not choose for his own affliction or for others' affliction, or for the affliction of both. In that way, there comes to be extinction here and now without delay, inviting inspection, onward leading, and experienceable by the wise. So we're talking about an extinction of suffering and the causes of suffering. The word nirvana or nibbana means the extinction of craving. That's what it refers to. And it is through the extinction of craving that we are able to experience the ultimate truth, which is liberating. Craving perpetuates the illusions that keep us from discovering this ultimate truth. And so there are a variety of reasons why we need to overcome craving. We need to overcome craving because it is actually the cause of our suffering. And we need to overcome craving because it is the source of those delusions that keep us from understanding this ultimate truth, which will completely liberate us. And the important thing about this is that in none of this, although it of necessity tends to be described in negative terms, in terms of what is absent and what is not there and what is not real, that when we say that we need to discover the truth, that the self we think we are doesn't exist, never has existed, and so therefore cannot be annihilated, that we are in search of something that is positive rather than negative. We're not searching out this a negative in the sense of annihilation. What the Buddha had to say about that is, the unaffected is hard to see. It's not easy to see truth. To know is to uncover craving. To see is to have done with owning. There is an unborn, as unbrought to being, and unmade, and unformed. If there were not, there would be no escape. No. Here, for one who is born, brought to being, made, and formed, there would be no escape. But because there is an unborn, an unconditioned, an unformed, there is. But since there is an unborn, an unbrought to being, an unmade, and unformed, an escape is therefore described for one who is born, brought to being, made, and formed. And this is the understanding of this truth that liberates us from the illusion and frees us from the trap that we find ourselves in because of our biological, evolutionary nature of being beings with a particular kind of mind, a particular kind of inclination, and so that illusion is there. I mean, this desire and aversion is not there by accident, and it's not because we were bad kids in a previous lifetime. It's because, and this illusion of self, likewise, is not there for any of those kinds of reasons. The reason that we exist as the kind of beings we do is that over time we evolved, and part of our evolution that made us successful was having a mind that formed this clear, solid idea of self, and along with the idea of self was this sense of the self, this feeling of the self as a reality. And a mind that, having created that idea of the self and the feeling of the self, then would generate desire and aversion in response to different things, so that we would desire and pursue and accumulate those things that contributed to our survival. And that if somebody else came along and tried to take our mate away from us, we would feel a strong aversion and go tear a strip off of it. They're functional. And they don't exist in order to make us happy. And they definitely stand in the way of our happiness. But the wonderful thing is that, number one, they can be overcome. So just as biological entities that have a mechanism in our brain and mind that selfs, that creates the idea of a self, and as an entity that has mechanisms in our mind that propel us forward and motivate us through desire and aversion, the fact that that can be overcome, that is wonderful news. But as thinking beings, as having the kind of intelligence and perception that we do, that would be good. I mean, why can't I just be happy? Why can't everybody just be happy? Well, if we can get over that false belief in self and cease to be driven by desire and aversion, be freed from suffering, and therefore experience contentment and happiness, that's a good thing in itself. That is a reward, absolutely, no question. But there is a part of us that wants to know, that seeks truth, that will say, you know, if you can have this happiness, there's a part of you that's still going to say, well, all this happiness is really good, and I don't have near as much dissatisfaction as I used to, but there's still this sort of existential, why? And what is truth? And then there's, we are called Homo sapiens, and the sapiens part of that means that what is most characteristic of us is this thirst for understanding and knowledge and putting that knowledge to use. So we still have that. And so what is offered in this path goes beyond that. When the doors of perception are cleansed, we see what really is. And what is infinite, it is perfect, and it is perfectly satisfying.